What's up, Internet? My name's Gus, and I've been watching anime for most of my life. I like to talk with friends about anime, and I also like to write about anime from time to time. But I've never made a video about anime. Until today. So welcome to my top 10 anime series of 2019. In this video, I'll be going over my personal picks for the top 10 best shows of the year. For each one, I'll be given a brief synopsis, followed by a mostly spoiler-free rundown of my thoughts and feelings about it. And just as a heads up, I did see a lot of shows in 2019, but I couldn't get through them all. I didn't see Carol and Tuesday, I didn't see Black Clover, and I also didn't see Beastars. I did see Vinland Saga, but it's not on this list. Anyway, let's get into it. Number 10. Mob Psycho 102. I was pretty hyped for Mob Psycho's second season, and it certainly did not disappoint. It felt like it started out with a more personal and human focus than the first, one in which Mob undertakes a very emotional journey that is both endearing and believable. It felt very natural to see Mob arrive in a place where he had a foot in two worlds, sympathizing with spirits while also recognizing humanity's fear of them. And over the course of the season, it felt like moment after moment of bittersweet maturation for Mob as he grew as a person and came to terms with his own identity. The internal conflict that arises within him was painful to watch, but incredibly cathartic to see work itself out. And it wasn't just Mob that got this treatment. Reagan underwent his own series of experiences and meaningful changes, preceded by a first look into what his life was like before meeting Mob. We also got to see real conflict between him and Mob for what felt like the first time, which put Reagan on an isolated and narrow path where he just kept digging himself deeper and deeper into trouble. The way Mob Psycho grew its two central characters in this season felt very well executed, and the way they arrived together at the end of their paths was one of the most powerful moments of the year. And I haven't even mentioned the new enemies and conflicts that dominate the latter half of the season, in which we got new and powerful villains, frenetic battles, and unexpected associations. So not only did we get intimate character-focused developments, but also the mind-blowing action and jaw-dropping visuals that Mob Psycho is known for. It really was a complete package. Number 9. Blade of the Immortal. Originally a manga and already adapted into an anime once before, Blade of the Immortal is a gory, violent tale of revenge and consequence. Rin, seeking revenge for the murder of her parents, enlists the aid of a powerful and supposedly immortal swordsman, which sets her on a long and bloody journey for vengeance. I was on the fence whether or not to even put this one on my list. The violence, especially in regard to its treatment of women, was very difficult to stomach at times. I found many of its scenes of this nature to be in nearly too poor of a taste. And taken in a vacuum, I felt that these elements risked turning Blade of the Immortal into no more than an edgy shock fest, designed to provoke more than entertain. But the more I watched, the more substance I found. And even though I'm basing this on only 12 of the planned 24 episodes, I found that beneath the blood and gore was a haunting, cautionary tale about power and revenge. The central focus on Rin's revenge is a great treatment on how a grudge born from traumatic events can change over time. It can burn bright at first, settle into your tissues over time, and become a part of you that becomes like breathing. It can become your defining characteristic, causing you to question who you are and what you're even doing. Watching Rin on her journey, as her revenge evolves and changes with her, is a saddening yet captivating experience. And what's great is that she's just the center of a wider conflict between more powerful players and entities. Rin's parents were a casualty of an up-and-coming school of swordsmen who were committing violent takeovers of rival dojos. And this group of swordsmen attracts their own powerful enemies from across the nation, sparking a huge power struggle in the region. Rin's personal quest for vengeance within this grander countrywide war of dominance produces a heavily layered saga of death and desire, one that is both disturbing and thought-provoking. If you can forgive the aforementioned violent content, I think you will find a somber and complex tale in this one. Number 8. Astra Lost in Space. Astra Lost in Space was barely on my radar before I watched it, but since the source material had a good reputation, and I was itching for some science fiction, I picked it up when it aired in the summer. And I'm glad I did, because it was such a complete and well-rounded story that took me completely by surprise. It follows a group of high schoolers in the future who go on an interplanetary field trip, only to get stranded in space and forced to figure out a way back. And on the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward science fiction space show, but under that was a multi-layered mystery full of intrigue. I love stories that grow in scale and complexity, evolving along the way into richer and richer tales. And Astra Lost in Space is one such example. You think you know what it's about, only to be shown a new wrinkle at every corner. The show also has an overarching theme of family and acceptance. Forced to live in close quarters and trust each other with their lives, each student's troubles and circumstances are laid bare to the group and the viewer in compelling fashion. And though this often causes some conflict amongst the characters, there are many hard-earned moments of release as they learn to become more and more reliant on each other. It's a great tale of resilience and the value of family in the face of overwhelming crisis. It's also funny at times too, providing some great moments of levity between the more serious tones. From beginning to end, it's a very carefully crafted miniature space opera. So if you're looking for a short series that runs its course at a perfect pace, or a complete encapsulated tale that leaves you satisfied, I would definitely recommend this one. Number 7. Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season. I feel like stories about adolescent romance and coming-of-age experiences are a dime a dozen in anime. It feels like a lot of slice-of-life shows that are based in reality usually have some element of romance or school crushes. As a result, and as someone whose teens and 20s are already in the rear view, these kinds of series have lost a lot of their impact on me. But Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season did what a lot of its genre predecessors have failed to do for me in recent memory, and that is to rekindle that bittersweet heartburn of what it feels like to have a love in your youth. The show revolves around the members of a high school literature club who spend their afternoons consuming and dissecting various literary works. That is, until the book's discussion of sex disturbs the club's romantically inexperienced members. This sets each member on their own rocky path of sexual awakening, with the primary focus of the show being on Kazusa and her relationship with her childhood friend Izumi. Kazusa, already consternating over her peers and their obsessions with sex, unwittingly witnesses Izumi in a very private moment. This rattles Kazusa, forcing her to see Izumi in a different light and reevaluate her own feelings toward him. This is the central plot of the show, but at the same time, each member of the literature club is working through their own various issues of romance as well, whether it's a first love, their understanding of romance as an author, or even how they feel about each other. This tumultuous slurry of raw emotions and adolescent insecurity was terribly heartaching to watch, yet undeniably intricate and compelling. Each character's journey and circumstance are so distinct, yet all connected by the theme of discovering oneself within the context of love. I've never felt so entertained and uncomfortable at the same time. I was constantly alternating between feeling sympathetic for them and being frustrated by their actions, all the while feeling the characters' own emotions stir within me. Their relationships and problems were very raw, very relatable, and very well written. It's difficult to maintain complex and interconnected storylines for this many characters, and Oh Maidens in Your Savage Season manages to do so spectacularly. It was a difficult tale to weave, and this series should be applauded for the job it did. Number 6. Dororo. Dororo is an old property, originating as a manga in the 1960s and already adapted as both a previous anime series and a live-action movie. And you'd think that decades-old stories about wandering samurai in feudal Japan would get old, but no, Dororo knocked it out of the park, taking that formula of baddie the weak and molding it into a rich Japanese fable about family, sacrifice, and the pursuit of your very self. If you've never heard of it, Dororo is about a boy named Hyakimaru who was sacrificed to the gods by his father in exchange for the domain's prosperity. This deal causes the boy to be born without skin, eyes, or even limbs. Left for dead as an infant, but spared by the kindness of others, the boy survives to become a deaf, mute, and blind swordsman with blades hidden inside his prosthetics. And on its own, that's already a pretty badass premise. But the main plot of the show revolves around Hyakimaru's relationship with a child thief named Dororo, who accompanies him as he gets his body parts back by defeating demons, eventually trying to confront the father who sacrificed him. And it is quite the ride. The show is 24 episodes, and the story they tell makes it feel chock full of both time and character progression. I've seen shows that were twice as long that didn't tell as rich of a story. Whether it's the relationship between Dororo and Hyakimaru, the circumstances of the demons and enemies, or the motivations of Hyakimaru's family, a lot of thought is given to developing the characters and their associations. In what amounts to a story about fighting for the ownership of your very self, the moral we're given is that it is noble to sacrifice your family, but abhorrent to sacrifice your family. That family will accept you, even when you think you're incomplete and without value, and that your very identity belongs to you and you alone. It has a lot of great things to say about self-confidence and trust, and the value of the bonds of both family and friendship. The only negatives I can think of would be some moments in the first half, in which the Monster of the Week formula got a little stale. But overall, it really was an enthralling tale from beginning to end. Number 5. Dr. Stone. When I first laid eyes on Dr. Stone, my first thought was, wow, this looks very shonen and very doofy. But the premise of humanity being turned to stone for thousands of years, only to wake up in a new Stone Age, very much appealed to my science fiction tastes. And having never read the source material, I picked it up hoping it'd at least be decent. Suffice to say, my expectations were beyond exceeded. I've always been a fan of stories that focus on humanity and what it took to get where we are. The eons of effort that countless people expended to create the building blocks of human knowledge and advancements that have gotten us to where we are today. And despite its cartoony aesthetic, I found that Dr. Stone did a stellar job of romanticizing the perseverance of humanity. Senku, the main character, is the personification of humanity's zeal towards obtaining knowledge. And as I watched him relish the task of reclaiming the prominence of our species, I felt a lot of the same emotions as him. That mouth-watering urge to crawl back from nothing, frightened yet undaunted by the reality of the obstacles. And, as all good stories do, Dr. Stone gave us a villain with an opposing yet not illogical goal, that being of a more perfect humanity, untainted by its adults and their vices. I found the conflict between these two ideas and their followers to be grown at a very delightful and deliberate pace. Nothing is rushed, and living through the build-up to the eventual conflict is very entertaining. And if I may add, without going into spoilers, Dr. Stone has yet another very human angle to it. Faith and love, as cheesy as that may sound. Faith in the people important to you that they can overcome anything, and the love for them that even thousands of years cannot destroy. Two very human notions that allow us to transcend space and time itself, even when everything else is taken from us. Overall, I would say that Dr. Stone is a fun and deceptively deep science fiction romp through the human spirit, and I am eagerly awaiting the second season.
Yo. Mic check. JK.
Number 4. Wasteful Days of High School Girls. I doubt many people had this one in their top 10 list, but for me, it was easily the best comedy of the year. I find that it's sometimes hard for a slice-of-life comedy to maintain a high-impact comedic tone for an extended period of time. Usually there are elements of mystery, romance, absurdist reality, or moe fan service to round out a show's aesthetic. And for good reason, it's difficult to pin a whole series on a single tone or genre. But in Wasteful Days of High School Girls, they've masterfully assembled a 3-girl squad that runs a well-oiled formula of gags and situational humor. Here's the setup. A close-knit group of 3 childhood friends get separated when they go to different middle schools, but are reunited when they all go to the same high school. And that's it. That's the whole premise. There's no club they join or some goal they work towards. There's no magical or fantasy plot. They just meet up again and start school. The rest is just pure character-based situational humor, with each girl playing a unique role within their group dynamic. And it is hilarious. A group of unredeemable assholes, riffing off each other in socially awkward situations. You have Woda, the straight man and sole voice of reason. Robo, the deadpan brainiac who's hard to read. And Baka, the lovable fool that is often the spark of the predicaments they find themselves in. It's very difficult to describe in words, but their chemistry lends itself very well to both slapstick comedy and clever long-play jokes. And in addition to this central trio, you also get a diverse grab bag of hilarious side characters, each getting their own focus. The popular beauty who's secretly a stalker, the deluded weirdo who lives in her own fantasy, the small girl who hates her reputation as a lolly but is actually a cutesy grandma's girl lolly. Every supporting character is cleverly written, and each one brings their own dynamic when playing off the main trio. And did I mention the voice acting? Because the work the VAs put into this is something special. Combine all these elements and you get a supremely rich comedy experience, constantly changing its stylings between slapstick, situational, puns, and the absurd. Slice of Life has rarely been so hilarious. Number 3. The Promised Neverland. If you skipped The Promised Neverland when it came out, then you missed out on one of the most tense and cerebral thrillers of 2019. I hadn't read the manga, but I could tell going into it that the orphanage was not what it seemed. Even so, I was not expecting to be so shocked at the truth. The reveal in the first episode, even with near to none blood or gore, was incredibly horrific and very unexpected. From the way the scene was constructed to the reactions of the characters, everything about that scene was so impactful, and it sure did set the tone. If you're unfamiliar with it, the show amounts to a prison break plot, with the 3 main children being forced to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of their quote-unquote mom, going so far as to set up long plays that don't pay off for months or even years. And it was a nerve-wracking delight to see the psychological drama play out. Every episode I thought things would come crashing down on them. Each moment was filled with tension and real fright for the children. The adversary of the show is also incredibly deep and decidedly unsettling. They do a good job of setting her up as a fearsome, all-knowing overlord, controlling every aspect of the children's lives as they rack their brains trying to outsmart her. Yet, the show goes the extra mile to imbue her with a sort of conflicted humanity, making you guiltily sympathize with her. In addition, the pace at which the nature of the orphanage and its operators is revealed is very palatable. The world is teased to you ever so slowly, giving you more and more information as the children work towards their goal. Never overwhelming you with exposition, but never leaving you in the dark for too long either. The Promised Neverland is a well-paced psychological thriller, brimming over with suspense and elements of horror. If you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely treat yourself. Number 2, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba. With its multi-dimensional main character, relatable antagonists, compelling fights, and gorgeous visuals, Demon Slayer elevated itself beyond the run-of-the-mill shonen to a well-rounded near masterpiece. The synopsis is, Tanjiro comes home to find that his family has been slaughtered by a demon, with his sister Nezuko gravely injured and turning into a demon herself. They are then confronted by a demon hunter, who is surprised to see Nezuko retaining her humanity. Seeing the potential in Tanjiro and taking pity on Nezuko, the demon hunter tells Tanjiro to seek out his retired mentor for training. This sets the stage, with Tanjiro beginning his quest to get stronger and find the demon who killed his family. And if that sounds a little too formulaic, you'd actually be right. The beginning of the show did indeed suffer a little from some classic anime cliches. A young boy fighting monsters of the week, shouting out the names of his moves. All the while his inner monologue tries to think 2 steps ahead. But Demon Slayer then brought a fresh approach, with each adversary being given significant depth of character via Tanjiro's unique perspective of demons. As you can imagine, with his sister being a demon herself, Tanjiro holds a unique view towards them. He gives no quarter to those that he fights, but he views demons themselves as fundamentally tragic creatures, their pre-demon experiences often being full of hardship, and their decisions the result of unfortunate circumstances. This imbues every fight with a sense of both emotional depth and tragedy, showcasing both Tanjiro's perseverance and his compassion toward his enemies. And Tanjiro is only the main tentpole of Demon Slayer. The fights themselves are wildly creative, making use of 3-dimensional space to a degree that you rarely see. Adversaries are also kept fresh, each having their own creative abilities and style that must be countered with increasing ingenuity. Visually, the show also benefits from a clean and colorful style. Characters are often enrobed in geometric patterns, with many subtle gradients and ombre effects in their designs, making for some very pleasing contrasts and thematic character establishment. 3D assets are often incorporated as well, which can often be a pitfall in anime but go very smoothly in Demon Slayer. All these elements are then animated by Ufotable in stellar fashion, producing some of the most beautiful and emotional scenes I've ever laid eyes on. At the end of the day, between the compelling depth of its protagonists, the rich and varied adversaries he faces, and the breathtaking animation, Demon Slayer is a refreshing and supremely well-rounded show. For these reasons, it takes my spot of number 2 anime series of 2019. And number 1, Attack on Titan, Season 3, Part 2. This is going to be difficult to articulate without spoilers, but here we go. Attack on Titan Season 3 Part 2 was good. It was really good. It was so good that, for me, it made Seasons 1 and 2 better. That's how good it was. I remember back in 2013, during the first season of Attack on Titan, people thinking that it completely changed the game. And it did, in some part. The story was so unusual, yet it was a great vehicle for showcasing humanity's will to survive in the face of overwhelming despair. But up until recently, the franchise seems to have had some difficulty recapturing that magic, even with what I believe to be Season 2's very strong showing in 2017. But Season 3 Part 2, set up beautifully by Part 1, which was its own great body of work, did something I've only seen done a handful of times in media. It redefined the events of the whole story up until then. It was as if I had been watching the show through a keyhole, only to have the door finally open. Seemingly minor events from as far back as the first season suddenly held gargantuan meaning. Foreshadowing and hints that were never even noticed were revealed to have been littered throughout the entire course of the show. From episode titles to characters' clothes to the smallest of phrases, countless elements of the series from the very beginning were given new color, a new relevance. The seeds of nearly every mystery that was planted throughout the show bore fruit in Season 3, Part 2. And hand in hand with these revelations, we got some serious character development for our main protagonist. I feel like Eren had always been sort of incomplete as a character, lacking much more beyond his anger and fighting ability. But he goes through some significant changes, to the point where he seems like a completely different person by the end of it. As our perspective widens on the world, so does his. His preoccupations, his temperament, what he holds dear, all go through a dramatic shift, organically changing his personality and focus as the secrets of the world are revealed. And as is the fashion for Attack on Titan, Season 3 Part 2 contained the most tense and gut-wrenching battle scenes yet, with the majority of the season focusing on a single all-or-nothing battle, the retaking of Shiganshina District. From its preparation to its climax, and all the perilous moments in between, this conflict overflowed with sacrifice, shock, and unexpected character choices. The writing for this conflict alone was spectacular. The patience and ingenuity required to write, visualize, and compose the course of the battle is, in a word, impressive. They took all those major beats and conveyed to the viewer a lengthy, tense, and cohesive military campaign, which had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. Attack on Titan Season 3 Part 2 was nothing short of breathtaking. The intricacy of the storytelling, the bones of which have been in position since the first second of the very first episode, is masterful. The foresight that must be necessary to construct a retroactively cohesive tale like this is mind-boggling, in my opinion. For this, it takes my spot as #1 anime of 2019. And the way things are going, when all is said and done, Attack on Titan may very well elevate itself to one of the greatest anime series of all time. And that is not hyperbole. And that's my list. How similar was it to yours? Were there any surprises? Any egregious omissions? Feel free to go ahead and let me know all that jazz. I've never made a video like this before, so any thoughts or feedback would be great. And if you sat through this whole thing, thanks. It means a lot. The end. Thanks for watching.